Good morning, all of our friends out there on YouTube.
Good morning. Hope you're having a great day so far.
What do y'all got going on this week? Anything fascinating, interesting, out of the ordinary? Or is it just one of those ordinary weeks for you?
Super ordinary for me.
Yep.
Painting all week.
Yep, very ordinary week, which is fine. Good to have those every once in a while.
Yeah. I like work, but this week I feel like I'm going to just lose a week of my life
Yeah.
from work. But that's okay.
Got to pay the bill.
for it.
We have to pay the bills, just like
Yep.
you have to pay the bills. So today's episode is going to be a heavier one.
Yeah.
We're talking about kids who are making decisions that we don't necessarily agree with, and older kids, maybe late teens, adults, and how do we handle that as parents?
Yeah.
And focusing in on the difference between enabling and helping our kids. So it'll be a weightier discussion that we have today, but I think it'll be helpful for a lot of people because we as parents often take on guilt for our kids' decisions.
Right.
And some of you are carrying a great amount of guilt because your children have chosen to make choices that you don't agree with, and they're involved in all kinds of stuff that this isn't how I raise my kid. Mm-hmm. What mistakes did I make? What could I have done differently?
Right.
So I hope that this conversation will be a help to you. It'll have a different tone than some of our episodes that are a little more lighthearted and fun, but the information is going to be so helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So let's get into it, and we're glad that you are here to join us. Now we'll get into recording the podcast.
Gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas. This is my wife, Lysandra.
Hello, and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 132 of the Family Meeting Podcast. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the difference between using tough love and enabling.
Yeah, and so this will be a hard conversation to have, but hopefully a helpful one for many of you. Before we jump into the content for today, though, I just want to ask you something. How is your marriage relationship? Do you feel like it's gone stale? Do you feel like it's not everything that it could be or should be? Are there areas of your marriage relationship where you're just struggling? If that's you, I want to encourage you to sign up for our relationship refresh, July 21st and 22nd of 2023. We're going to be in Orlando at the beautiful Point Resort and just have a great time. It's a great opportunity for you to get away from the busyness of life with your spouse and just spend time working on your relationship. And it's always a meaningful time for us, and I know that it'll be a helpful and meaningful time for you as well.
That's right. And I personally am looking forward to it. I can't wait. It always is a great refresh for our marriage relationship. And we get to really kind of dig deep into some things and re-examine some things. And it's great.
Most definitely.
It's a wonderful time. So as we get into our discussion today, we're really looking at more of a difficult topic. This line is difficult to navigate between tough love and enabling. It is not black and white. It is a very gray area. And before we dig into this weighty topic, though, we want to make it very clear that we're not professionals in this information, and we're not trying to present ourselves as that. Now, we do have experience, and so that's what we're bringing to the table. We've experienced personally with tough love and enabling with a close family member who was married to someone deeply chained to their addictions. So some of what you're going to hear today comes from our personal experiences, and we want to share what we have gone through. But we also have had many opportunities to provide support in a counseling setting to people who have family members struggling with addictions. But we also want to encourage any of you who have family members with addictions, or maybe you're struggling with your own, to get professional counseling from people who specialize in this field.
Yeah, and that is so key. To have people who, this is what they do day in and day out. They know the content back and forth. They have experience in all these addiction scenarios.
Highly educated.
And so it's good to have people that you can go to. Listen, I'm a pastor, and people come to me for counsel and advice, but I never pretend to be an expert where I'm not an expert.
Right.
And so having those people who deal with this all the time on your team is going to be helpful in dealing with this situation.
Right. And I want you to know as well that there are many free options out there.
Yeah.
It is not necessarily going to cost you money to find help, professional help in this. However, it is worth the money to get the help you need. But you can look around in your community and you can find free options to help you in this.
So our hope today is to bring just a little clarity to those who are living in the tension between enabling and tough love. And maybe this is exactly where you are today. We want to encourage you. We want you to know that you are not alone in this.
Yes.
The family meeting is more than a podcast. It's a community of people who want to see families thrive.
Yes.
And that's what we're inviting you into. And one of the ways that we can do this is through our Facebook group. And maybe you're not in the Facebook group right now. Listen, jump in and get involved in the conversation. Share what's going on in your life and your family, and I know that you will find people there who will pray for you, who will encourage you. Many of them have been exactly where you are and can help you along in this journey. So we want our family to be successful and healthy. We also want you to know that this episode is not exclusively about dealing with family members with addictions. We're sharing some other occasions of tough love and how it's appropriate to implement.
So we're going to look at what enabling is, first of all, today, because maybe you're not familiar with this term or it's a little blurry for you. Enabling always starts as completely harmless help. Okay? Enabling usually comes from a place of love where a parent or a family member says like, oh man, my family member is really struggling over here. I just want to help. And it's harmless and it's loving and it's caring. That's where enabling starts. Okay. So in other words, every time you help, it doesn't mean you're enabling, but the help that you're giving can turn into enabling as time progresses. So in the beginning, help isn't necessarily wrong and it doesn't move over into enabling until you begin to see patterns of negative behavior arise. So what is enabling anyway? Enabling supports other people's decisions and unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah.
The dictionary defines enable as this: to make something easy, to create conditions for it to happen. And other definitions of enabling include doing for others what they can and should do for themselves. Enabling may also be defined as the ability to provide somebody with the resources, authority, or opportunity to do something. And in this case, it's we're kind of describing helping them to do something that will be harmful to them or harmful to others. Maybe it's breaking the law. Maybe it is an addiction that is hurting them. It could be just negative behavior of manipulation where we're enabling them to be more manipulative or abusive to someone else.
And Lysandra, one of the key things that you just touched on and said was begin to see patterns of negative behavior. And that it really is key, because if you start to notice the patterns, like they're doing this all the time, this behavior is continuing and it's just a cycle.
Yep.
If you just continue to help the way you've been helping, you are enabling and creating the opportunity for them just to continue the pattern.
Right.
And I hope that helps you to be able to kind of more clearly see, am I enabling my child to, and you fill in the blank. But enabler is someone who directly or indirectly supports someone else's harmful behavior. And the intent with what you're doing doesn't really matter. Because, as we mentioned, hey, you're a parent.
Yeah.
You're a grandparent. Like, you wanna help them. Your intent is love. You want to be helpful. But just because we want to be helpful and our intention is to be helpful doesn't mean that we're actually being helpful.
Yeah.
So enabling is jumping in to solve someone's problems brought on by their own bad choices. So this harmful behavior can include addictions, such as drug abuse and alcoholism, unlawful actions or self-harm. And if a person continues to do wrong without any consequences, they are less likely to stop what they're doing or to get help, as in this case of an addict.
Mm-hmm. Right. So a few examples of enabling, because maybe you're thinking, okay, I understand what it means, but like, what is this in a practical setting? So we're going to give you some examples, varied examples of ways that enabling can actually be negative for your family member. A few examples of enabling would be calling in sick to work for your addict child. Okay?
Yeah. Like, oh, they're having an issue because of, doing drugs or whatever else. Or, hey, they're an alcoholic and they drank all night and now they're hungover and not able to go to work. So your intent is, I don't want my child to lose their job.
Yep.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call in sick for them. Mm-hmm. See, the intent is to help, but what we're really doing is we're enabling them and giving them the boldness to repeat the cycle.
Mm-hmm. And this could even happen when you have a child in school, maybe high school or college age, and you're writing a note to school in high school, or even, God forbid, middle school, but this happens.
Oh, yeah.
Because your child's hungover or coming off of a high, and you're trying to make an excuse. Maybe you're ashamed personally. Sure. You don't want all the other parents at school or the teachers, the principal, to know what your child is doing. So here you are writing a note to say, yeah, they're going to stay home from school because of da 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 da. Enabling maybe paying rent for your adult child so they stay in an apartment, even though they've lost their job because of their drug addiction. We've seen this. Enabling may look like hiding evidence in a crime you know your child has committed to protect them from the penalty of that crime. Could be something relatively simple like stealing, I don't
want my child to go to jail or get a record like that will hinder them for the rest of their life.
Right. So you feel like you're protecting them, but you're really enabling them to now go and commit the same crime all over again. It could be paying bills for them, providing transportation or a place to stay. Could be lying to others to protect their reputation, giving them money when they ask for it, bailing them out of jail, or simply pretending that there isn't a problem. Even that is enabling.
Yeah. And we talk about this often, but it's so important for us to be authentic in life. And there's so much freedom in that. And when we feel like we have to put on a show for other people, man, that's going to cause us so many problems. Yeah. And what we have to do as parents is we've got to understand that in all reality, it doesn't matter what that other couple thinks, what that other lady thinks, the moms or whatever else. We have to learn to do what's best for our child, even if it makes us look bad.
Yeah, and I think of an example that is maybe seems much more simplified and minimal. I was speaking with a mom whose child was, I want to say like 4th grade and still barely reading. And she didn't want the other moms to know her child struggled with reading. So she didn't want to put her child in special needs classes for reading because she didn't want anybody else to know that they had this problem. And I mean, we start at a very young age with our children trying to manage perceptions from other people of what they think our children are. We want everybody to think our kids are great, everything's great, when it maybe isn't. And the truth is everyone's got something, okay? Maybe your child is addicted to drugs. Maybe your kid can't read. Maybe your child is disrespectful. Maybe your child has an addiction to pornography. Whatever it may be, listen, everybody has struggles. Everybody has problems. You don't have to hide those things. Now, I'm not telling you to air out. I'm not telling you to go around and tell everyone about your child's porn addiction.
My son got arrested.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to. But at the same time, don't feel like you're living this life of a facade where you have to pretend everything's okay when it's not. Be real, be honest, and accept what's happening in your life. And find good, godly people who you can talk to about it and be real with.
Well, and the more you're open and honest and genuine about what's going on in your life, that creates an environment for others to be open and honest and genuine. And then what you can do is you can get help, you can get support, you can get encouragement. But if we're so full of pride that we don't want anyone else to know that our family isn't perfect, we close off ourselves from all the help, the support, and the encouragement and the wisdom and advice that we could be getting.
Absolutely. Yep.
But enabling usually comes from the desire to protect or help. I think Lysandra just touched on that just a second ago. Most often, if someone is enabling someone else, it's because they are trying to do what is right. Mm-hmm. They just don't realize that they aren't actually helping their loved one. Mm-hmm. But what they're doing is they're enabling them to continue down a path of harmful choices. And you, once again, you've got to think about those patterns. You've got to learn to see those patterns of harmful behavior. And so this enabler, and whether that's you or their grandparents or somebody else, a friend, they become part of the problem that they desire to fix. And so you're really making the situation worse. I'm making the situation worse when I enable the harmful behavior. Another reason for enabling also may be to prevent conflict between that person. And some of you out there, you are just by nature peacekeepers. Like whatever it takes to keep the peace. And I know because I'm married to one.
Yes, you are.
Now, she's learned and she's found her voice now. Mm-hmm. So she's grown and she's matured.
Mm-hmm. You've helped me a lot with that too.
But some of you are peacekeepers out there and you're like, I just want to keep the peace with my son. I want to keep the peace with my daughter or my husband. And so I don't want to bring it up. Mm-hmm. Well, if that person is abusive, manipulative, or dangerous, an enabler may be helping them to prevent the conflict with them. Mm-hmm. Like, I know if I say something, then this is going to happen. If I bring it up, this is what's going to happen. If I don't give them what they're asking for right now, it's going to be a big, big deal, and I just don't want to deal with that. Mm-hmm.
As you listen to these descriptions of enabling, maybe you're realizing there's someone in your life like this. Man, this is hitting a little too close to home. And if you realize that you are enabling someone else's bad behavior or addiction, the first thing that you need to do is identify the enabling behaviors. Okay, so you're going to look at your life. You're going to look at what you've been doing, your actions, your words, whatever. And you're going to say, okay, when I gave them money, I was actually enabling them to go buy drugs or, whatever you want to talk about. You got to identify the enabling behaviors. You can't stop enabling unless you admit that you're an enabler.
Oh, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Denial ain't just a river in Egypt, right?
Okay.
I went back to like childhood when people used to say that, and it was really funny.
I don't know that it was ever funny, but...
Oh, okay. It's just in Walker, Iowa.
Yeah, good try.
Thank you. But yeah, we've got to realize that, okay, what I'm doing isn't helping. And then, you got to understand that this is going to be a difficult thing to admit. Like, you have to realize this is so difficult because you love your child or your family member. You love them so much, and everything that you've done is to help them. Yet when you admit that the things that you've done has actually enabled their bad behavior and that you haven't really been helpful, but rather allowed them to continue to harm themselves, it hurts. I mean, that is a hard burden to bear when you realize that you've helped the problem. But it is the first step in being able to stop enabling them.
And I want you to understand that this is not your fault.
Right.
Okay? Your child is not an addict because of the way you raise them. Your child is not a kleptomaniac because of something you did. Everyone makes their own choices. Mm-hmm. And all of us can think of ways that our parents failed or didn't parent like we thought that they should, weren't loving enough, weren't strict enough, or whatever. Yet none of those things are reasons for us to break the law or do wrong or mistreat or abuse somebody. Mm-hmm. We don't have to repeat the same offenses.
Right.
I am who I'm choosing to be. I do what I choose to do. Mm-hmm. And there's no outside force that has to dictate who I am. Mm-hmm. Your past does not have to dictate your future. It only does when we choose to let it.
And I think you, Thomas, excuse me, are a great example of this because your father did not show love. Your father did not say, I love you. He was verbally abusive, for sure. Sometimes physically abusive. And yet that is not who you are. You have chosen to break that cycle. And you have chosen to be a very loving father and to use self-control to control your temper and all of those things. So just because our parents did or did not do something does not give us an excuse to do the exact same thing.
No, we all have a choice to break bad cycles. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for us to personally own up to what we've done. Like, I do my best to be the best father, the best husband I can possibly be. I know there's times where I fail and make mistakes, and I try to own that. Mm-hmm. And the same is true for each one of you who are listening to this. I'm sure that you are trying the best that you possibly can do. You wouldn't be listening to a podcast like this unless you cared about family relationships and growing personally in your family relationships. So I know you're trying the best that you can. Listen, let that be enough, okay? Let that be enough. Our children are ultimately responsible for the choices that they make. Mm-hmm. So understanding that you're not to blame is very important to be able to stop enabling. Like, you're not to blame for the choices that your child is making. Just as you had a choice whether to do right or wrong, your children have choices to do right or wrong, regardless of how you raise them. Mm-hmm. And I think about what James talks about, and he's talking about temptation. And I think this fits perfectly with what we're talking about here. And our children, they make the choices for themselves, and they're responsible for their own choices. He says this in chapter 1 of his letter, in verses 14 and 15. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desires. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. But you notice how he starts that conversation about temptation there? That they are lured and enticed by their own desires. In other words, what they do is a personal choice. So if I choose to be disrespectful, that's a choice I've made. Mm-hmm. If I give in to alcoholism, that's the choice I'm making. Whatever it is, it's a choice I personally made that I didn't have to make. And the same is true for your children, for your grandchildren, your friends and family, and everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't like this next step, and you won't either. The next step in helping yourself to stop the enabling is realizing and accepting that you can't fix it.
That is hard.
This is hard, yeah, because that's the whole point. That's why we bailed them out of jail. That's why we told their teacher, whatever. Okay, it's because we wanted to fix the problem. We wanted to do whatever we could so that this wasn't their problem. And as a parent, that's what we want so badly, is to make their life smooth, carefree, good, positive. But there are times when we just can't fix it.
Yeah.
You don't have the ability to make this person change their behavior. You don't have what they need to get healthy. You got to accept it. They need professional help. this also means accepting that you can't protect them from themselves. And that's really tough.
Well, and I think one of the things that is so important for us to understand is no one's going to change unless they personally want to change. Mm-hmm. No one's going to receive help unless they want to receive help. Mm-hmm. And most often, we do not change unless there's an outside pain or pressure to make us want to change. Mm-hmm. So you think about any time you've ever changed anything in your life. I'm right now trying to change the way that I eat and what I drink. So there was a pain pressure, right? Because I got to the heaviest I've ever been in my life. And I looked at that and said, I don't like what I see. I don't like the way that I feel on a regular basis. So it wasn't until I got to that point, though, that I was willing to change what I ate and how I observed taking in food and calories and all those sorts of things. And that's just like a very basic thing. So the same is true about whatever harmful behavior that your loved one's involved in, or maybe you're the one who's involved in it. Mm-hmm. Until you feel that pain or there's that pressure point to change, you're not going to change. They're not going to change.
That's right. So we've got to accept that. And many times we've sat across from couples on couches where the wife dragged in the husband for counseling.
Oh, yeah.
Or vice versa.
Or like blindly brought them into a couples retreat.
Yes.
And they had no idea that's why they were there that weekend.
Yep.
I guarantee you that husband heard nothing.
He was not going to change.
About what we said that weekend. It did not help the relationship at all.
Yes. You cannot force people to change. They have to do that on their own, which ultimately means you can't fix them. You can't fix the problem. All that you can do is pray for them and figure out how to implement tough love, which is what we're going to kind of look at next. It might be time for you to bring in a little tough love in your family relationship.
So we are told over and over again throughout the Word of God to love one another. Mm-hmm. And that ought to be an anthem of your life and of your family, is we're going to love each other.
Yes.
Jesus said this in John 13, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another." And so he not only says, hey, I'm commanding you to love each other, he also tells us what that looks like. He says, just like I loved you. Unconditionally, sacrificially, and it's not always, we can't always love people the way we want to love them. Mm-hmm. We need to love them the way they need to be loved.
Mm-hmm. With their best interest at heart.
And I think of also what John wrote in 1 John chapter number 4. He says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another." You love your family member, mm-hmm. and that love has led you to help them. But sometimes the way to love looks a little different than what we naturally want it to. And this is when tough love has to come into play. Okay,
so let's define tough love. We find in the dictionary tough love as love or affectionate concern expressed in many different manners as their discipline, especially to promote responsible behavior. Okay? Tough love is not about being rude or unkind or mean. That's not what we're talking about. Tough love is about loving someone so much that you make a tough choice. Not the easy choice, but the tough choice. And what's the easy choice? The easy choice is to bail your loved one out of their problem.
Yeah.
The easy choice is to protect their reputation, your reputation, to prevent any shame from coming in. The easy choice is to pay the money so that you don't see your grandchild get evicted with their parents. That's easier. The tough choice is to watch a person that you love so deeply experience the consequences of their choices. That's tough.
Oh, yeah.
But that's real love, because it's all about their best interest at heart. And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that tough love is harder on the person who's giving it than the person who's receiving it.
Oh, most definitely.
I think that that's quite a bit tougher.
And when I think about tough love, I think about a story that Jesus told about a father and his 2 sons. And one day, one of his sons came to him and said, "Dad, I wish you were dead." I mean, you think about what those words do to a parent. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Give me the inheritance that I would get when you die. I want to go my own way. I want to do my own thing. I want to live my own life." And for whatever reason, Dad says, "Okay." He gives him the inheritance. The son goes away, a long ways away, and just kind of lives a life of sin. Mm-hmm. Sex, parties, just indulging in whatever he desires. And what happens is he blows through all the inheritance. He has nothing left, to the point where he decides, and I got to find some work. And the only work he could find was feeding pigs. And Jesus, in telling the story, says he got to a point where no one gave to him.
Right.
No one's helping him. No one's enabling him. Everyone around him is letting him feel the weight of his choices. That's tough love.
Right.
Tough love is letting your child feel the weight that their addiction has caused them. Tough love is letting your spouse feel the weight that their physical, emotional, sexual abuse has caused. That's what tough love looks like. And using tough love is a good thing, but it's a hard thing. Because when this son got to a point where nobody was enabling him any longer, then and only then does he come to himself. That's what Jesus told in the story. He said he came to himself and he began to think about how much better things were for him at home. Mm-hmm. He began to value the relationships that he had and what they provided for them. But he didn't come to himself and get to a point where he needed to change, once again, until he felt the pain point and the pressure from outside. Mm-hmm. People had to stop enabling him. They had to show him some tough love. And you should use tough love when a loved one indulges in behavior that could cause harm to themselves or others. Finding help, counselors, support groups, or meetings that can help you understand this world is very important. And there are people who are professionals in these areas, and their help can be vital to your understanding of enabling and tough love. And you may just have to go down and see a counselor and say, "Hey, this person I love is involved in X, Y, and Z, and I want to help them, but I know often my help is just enabling them, so I need some help here. I need some guidance. I need some wisdom on how to properly show them the tough love that they need."
Mm-hmm. I remember when I heard about tough love for the first time. That was not really a term we used in our home at all. I grew up in such a really warm, loving family for the most part. And I was probably about 16 years old when my parents and I walked into an ASAC counseling center. And my parents were in such deep pain because of what a family member was going through. And we had a family member who had married a very deeply chained drug addict. And their lives were just falling apart. And my parents had bailed them out so many times. And they didn't know what to do. They were at their wits' end. And we went in, the three of us, to this counseling center. And this very wonderful woman sat there at her desk and just explained how my parents were enabling. And my parents had paid rent. They had brought groceries. They had done all this stuff. And the counselor said because you are paying their rent, because you are giving them money, because you're buying them food, they have no reason to change their behavior.
Right.
And so what she said is you need to implement tough love. And I think that that was a foreign concept to us because our concept of love was always give, help, support.
Yeah.
And she explained that tough love means cutting off help in order that they feel their consequences and they choose to change. So what she said is that there was a child involved. And so she said, do anything and everything to help the child. Take care of the child. But do your best to take care of the child apart from the parents. So that meant if the child was hungry, picking up the child and feeding the child. Or bringing the child to our home, which we did quite frequently and loved it. And letting her stay there, letting her be with us, taking her to church, we took her to Awana and all those things. And we made sure that the child was well cared for, but my parents had to stop giving to the parents. And I cannot even explain to you how difficult that was. Now, maybe many of you who are listening have been there. Maybe you are there right now.
Yeah.
And you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, it's awful. It is hard. It hurts. And it hurt us because we had to watch these people go through severe repercussions, become homeless, lose jobs, lose relationships, be physically ill because of their choices. And we didn't step in to help. And, obviously I was a teenager, so I was kind of along for the ride, but watching my parents go through the emotion of that was devastating. It was awful. I'm so happy to say though, because they got that good advice, because they got somebody who was a specialist and lived in the world of addiction, who came along and explained it all to them and said, like, this is what you're doing. This is what you need to be doing. Because they got that help. These family members who were involved in all this, now the one is free. A divorce happened and she became free from this world.
Yeah.
But that never would have happened unless she felt these consequences. It had to get bad. And it got really bad, you guys. It got terrible. All right. And I'm not going to go into details, but it was ugly. And it was hard to watch. And yet it's exactly what they needed to come out of this situation. And I'm so happy to say that now this person is healthy and well and thriving and doing great.
Yes.
But you know what? That took years. And sometimes we feel like I just want to give tough love one time. I want to do it once and then be done with it. It became a lifestyle. Like we lived for years, implementing tough love and not helping this person. And it's really hard. And I know that those of you who are going through this, you don't want this to be your life. You don't want to keep doing this. But hang in there. Keep allowing them to feel the consequences. Let it get really bad for them. Because as Thomas was talking about with the story of the prodigal son in the Bible, until they get to rock bottom, until they hit the bottom, they will not change their behavior.
Yeah.
So I want to encourage you to stick with it. It is hard and you are living a life of pain and hurt. And I know that. But I want to encourage you. You can do it. You're doing this because you love them, not because you hate them, not because you are over them or you're done with them. It's because you love them that you're going through this. So hang in there. Keep it up. You're doing the right thing. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, and tough love comes into play all the time. You probably just don't even realize that you do it. We don't only use tough love with addicts, but with all of our children all the time. Mm-hmm. When your child refuses to wear a coat, even though you tell them, hey, it's cold outside, you might want to grab a coat, you might want to get a jacket, and then they complain about being cold when they're far away from the house, you implement tough love by allowing them to feel the cold.
I remember when this happened kind of recently in our home. And I was cold also, but I took off my jacket and I was going to give it to one of the kids. And you were like, no, you told them that it was going to be cold. You told them to grab their jacket and they didn't. You keep your jacket on.
Yeah.
And that was hard as a mom because, the mother's heart comes in. I just want my baby to have the coat and be warm. I'll be cold. But they don't learn the lesson that way.
Well, and it's not going to physically harm them to feel the cold weather, especially here in Florida.
Yeah, we're not talking about frostbite.
Right? So if they feel the cold, next time when that's mentioned, they'll think twice about it. Okay, I need to grab a sweatshirt. I need to grab a jacket just in case mom is right.
Yeah, just in case mom is right. That's a good way to live your life.
Yeah. When your child refuses to do the dishes when they're told, you bring a consequence, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's tough love. When your child gets a bad grade because of lack of effort, you make them retake the test, you make them try for extra credit, or bring in some other consequence of their actions. You're giving them tough love in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I remember a time that tough love really stands out. And this is like one of those mini versions of tough love, which we do all the time and just don't realize it. One of our girls wanted to wear flip-flops even though there was snow outside. This was in Iowa. And I told them, you're going to want to wear socks and boots. You're not going to want to wear those flip-flops. And they begged me, please, can I wear the flip-flops? I want to wear flip-flops. So I let them wear flip-flops. And their feet, sure enough, were freezing in the snow. And this was kind of a controlled situation where I knew we were going to be close to home. So it wasn't very long before they came back inside to change into boots. But they had to feel their feet freezing in the snow before they would make a choice to change their behavior. They're not going to go ahead and do what they need to do and make the right choice until they feel the pain. And that's just one of those mini versions of tough love. And we do it all the time. You parents, you implement tough love all the time. You allow your children to feel consequences to help them change behaviors. But when it comes to addictions or it comes to, breaking the law and those kinds of things, that's when we think, oh, I'm not going to do tough love. I'm going to help my child. I'm going to bail them out. But it's the same principle you've probably used the entire way along as you parented.
Yeah. And you probably don't realize, but you give yourself tough love all the time also. Mm. And basically, it's essentially discipline. You're learning to be disciplined with your life. I don't want to go to the gym, but I'm choosing to go because I want the results. Mm-hmm. I really, really want to eat that third piece of pizza, but I know it's gonna hurt me, so I'm not going to. The disciplines you set up for yourself are essentially tough love. So whether we realize it or not, we all have already used tough love in many circumstances. And when we get into the realm of addictions, the stakes are so much higher than just how many pounds are on your personal scale, which makes tough love significantly more difficult to implement. Mm-hmm. And more important.
Right, yeah, because when the stakes are higher, it's even more important for you to allow them to feel their consequences so the behavior will change.
Yes.
Now, as we close out this episode, we want to just remind you that the family meeting is a community. It's not just a podcast. This is a community who is here to help and support you. And if there's any way that we can encourage you, reach out. Maybe you just want to share your story with us. Maybe you want to share some warnings that you've learned through mistakes you've made. Maybe you want to share your success story with us.
Yeah.
Text us, email us. We want to hear from you. We are here to support you and help you if you're in the middle of this journey. We want to hear from you. We are a community.
So as we talk about a family meeting tonight, we want you just to talk about tough love versus enabling. And hey, is there any situation in our family where we're enabling somebody to continue a cycle of harmful behavior, whether it's on themselves or on somebody else? If the answer is yes, you need to have some conversations about that. If the answer is no, you still need to have some conversations about that. Mm-hmm. We need to, at a young age, teach our children about this so that when things happen, whether it's personally in their own life, and they make some choices we don't agree with, that they know this is kind of the road we're going to go down. Mom and Dad are not going to enable you to have and continue patterns of harmful behavior. But it also helps them and gets them in this mindset that, hey, if God blesses them with children and with families, or their spouse gets involved in something, their friends get involved in something, they know enabling is not helpful in the situation. It's not what's best. So having that conversation, even if there's nobody in your realm that is doing this, is so important. And then we also want to talk about the flip side of that and how we need to have tough love at times. And maybe there's a situation going on in your family right now that it's time to mete out some tough love. And you've tried to help in different ways, and it's not really helped. It's just kind of enabled them to continue on. And now we need to make some choices. And maybe it's just something as simple as your child's grades. And hey, we've tried to give grace, and we've tried to give room, and we've done all these different things, but your grade's not going up. Hey, it's time for some tough love. That means no video games until your grade gets up. That means no cell phone until you get this thing taken care of. Could be something as simple as that, or it could be one of these addictions we're talking about. It could be a life of abuse. And now it's time for you to carry out some tough love and having some conversations about what does that look like in that scenario in your family. Or maybe what you need to do is say, hey, we need to get some counseling. We need to get some professional help in this scenario because this is outside of our realm. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to turn. It's time to get a counselor. And so that might be the step that you need to take today.
Thanks for joining us today for this episode. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information to be helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. We'd love to hear from you, so shoot us a text or a call and leave us a message at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting as we talk about connecting with your kids through exercise.
Okay.
So this will be an interesting episode. This is something that we have done in our home, and we want to share it with you. And it'll be a little bit more of a lighthearted episode next week.
Most definitely.
Not quite as weighty as today. So join us for that next week.
Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
That's another one down, babe.
Yep. Very, very heavy conversation, but I think one that is so important to have with a lot of different people. You know, we have people in our lives who are struggling, who are hurting, who are making some poor choices, and we really want to help. But understanding what help looks like is so needful. And maybe you're watching and you've got a scenario. You've got something you're walking through right now. Listen, if you have some information that'd be helpful for our listeners and our watchers, man, put it in the comments there. We don't pretend to think we know it all or have it all figured out. And so if you've got some experiences that can be a help to us or a help to somebody else, hey, we want you to drop it there. We want you to share your knowledge and your experience because, as we talked about, this is not just a podcast. This is a community of people who are gathering together to support each other and to develop family relationships that we've always wanted to have.
That's right. So thanks so much for joining us, and we hope you have a fantastic week.
We'll see you later.